Welcome to another episode of Fight the Burnout, sponsored by Create From Why and our motorcycle retreat we have happening on the 20th of May. Want to know more information about that? Go to motorcyclemasterminds.com so that you can recharge, grow, and just ride. All being taken care of. The details are also down in the description down below. Today we have a special guest, a medical response person, I'm going to say. I know I got that completely wrong. I apologize, Michael. But he's going to tell us all around some things that he's been involved with. He works alongside law enforcement, SWAT teams, and he's also been involved in some pretty big incidents. So we're going to hear all about that. We're going to talk about burnout and all sorts of tools to overcome it that Michael has used. As we always do, I tell you, take one thing away from today and start actually putting it into action. There's so much information out here these days, even on all these podcasts that I do, there's so much information. Just take one thing, run with it, and you'll be a stronger, better version of yourself for it. So without further ado, Michael, why don't you take it away? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you've ended up where you are and some cool things that you've done.
All right, cool. Thanks, Chris, for having me on the podcast. I've listened to many of your podcasts and I'm excited to be on with you. So medical responder. Yeah. So I'm basically formally trained as a ER doctor. So I'm an emergency room physician. So a little bit about myself. So born and raised in Southern California. I know you're out in New Zealand, and always had an interest in law enforcement. So I went to UCLA for undergrad here in Southern California, decided to go back east for medical school, Harvard Medical School. And when I came back, I'd always had an interest in law enforcement as a young kid, and I was never able to do it because I'd had a football injury where I injured my back. I ended up needing surgery while I was actually in medical school, but that kind of prevented me to go into the academy. Went to medical school, did 4 years there. Boston was a great place, but I was homesick. I wanted to come home. And when I came home, I'd always wanted to do emergency medicine. That was something I was interested in at the time. And a buddy of mine was doing emergency medicine residency at Loma Linda, and there was already a collaboration with the emergency department and some of the providers there with the sheriff's department. So it was perfect for me. I'm like, well, I can become a cop, a doc, and let's do it. So in my 4th year of med school, I was able to finagle some elective time at the end of the 4th year, was able to go to the sheriff's academy, did a reserve academy, started residency, and basically joined San Bernardino Sheriff's and joined their air medics team. And I've been flying with them ever since, except for the last couple years after kind of COVID, I transitioned to the Aero Squadron, got my pilot's license, my fixed wing, and I've moved over to Aero Squadron. It's just kind of a better fit for me and my lifestyle now with 2 young kids. So that's kind of the short of it.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So I like to, before we jump into kind of talking around burnout and different, things that you've been involved in and done, what would you say your definition of burnout is?
Yeah, so I think my definition of burnout is basically something that you've loved over time starts to wear on you, and you no longer kind of have that love for it. And there's just little things maybe along the way, and even in my career where just little things, especially even COVID and being in emergency medicine, especially here in Southern California where we got hit pretty hard, you just get this kind of loop in your brain where small little things that didn't bother you in the beginning of your career start to bother you, every day and every week as you kind of continue on with your work. So that's what I would say.
I love the response. Now, off the back of that, do you have any time in your career or throughout your life up until now where you've felt like that?
I mean, so I'm burning out on emergency medicine. I've been doing it for 20 years now. And, and emergency medicine is one of those specialties in medicine where, the burnout rate in docs is probably close to up to 50%, when you pull them in terms of burnout. And especially since COVID, it was creeping up before that. But with COVID, just with the response, the kind of not knowing what's going on, where most medical facilities, or I shouldn't say facilities, specialties, surgeries were getting canceled, ophthalmology, dermatology, nobody was doing anything. And it was the emergency room doctors, the urgent care doctors who ended up taking the blunt of everything. And it was a tough time to kind of not know if you got COVID, were you going to be the one that died, and, not having enough PPE at the beginning. I mean, it was, everything was up in the air. We'd had people telling us, oh, you don't need N95s. You could wear a simple mask. And then it switched over to N95s only. And then there wasn't enough. And I mean, it was madness. You started to get that sense from the administrators that it was like, do you really matter that much? Or is it bottom line? When administrators were faced with the fact of, oh, well, we can buy these N95s, but they're 4 times or 5 times as expensive. Oh, well, why don't you just use that N95 for the full day, or, for as long as you can wear it, which is, I mean, it's not safe. And so you start to kind of get that like, well, maybe I'm not really all that important to them. So, that doesn't help with the burnout.
No, that definitely doesn't. And it's funny you say all of that. It's exactly the same stuff. And I'd love to know if you've seen that side of stuff when it comes to working with law enforcement and being, on that close to that medical side, but that close involvement with law enforcement. Have you seen that kind of same messaging feeling happening there as well?
Yeah, I mean, so those guys, and especially like EMS personnel, the law enforcement EMS personnel, I mean, they were, in the same situation where it's like, if you're going to a domestic and someone's coughing, do you really want to walk into that house? You may or may not even have an N95. You may not even know if the N95 is good enough. So, there was a lot of just uncertainty in the beginning of kind of COVID. And then as the year, went on, and, as we learned more, became less uncertain. But yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't help, while everybody else is sitting at home, remote working, and even complaining to this day about having to go back to work 2.5, 3 years later. What about us? We were here working every day nonstop.
Yeah. Do you feel like it was more of a like, besides just COVID, but also just in the medical stuff, obviously being a bit burned out, feeling a bit burned out now. Would you say it's more emotional or physical burnout?
I think it's emotional. Yeah. I mean, here, look, the reality is emergency medicine. I mean, law enforcement is worse, but emergency medicine, I mean, what am I doing? I'm sitting at a computer, I'm going to see patients, I'm doing an exam. Maybe I do a procedure, I'll do an intubation, a central line. I'm, over a patient for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I mean, I'm not digging a ditch, in 100-degree heat for 15 hours, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. I mean, so it's not physical. I think it's just kind of the emotional, it's one, in emergency medicine, you're dealing with life and death, not all the time. There's a lot of stuff that we see that has nothing to do with life and death. It's just the inability of patients to get into primary care, see their doctors, or it's just faster to come into the emergency department to get that x-ray for your ankle injury. But yeah, it's more it's the emotional side, dealing with the trauma, life and death, that kind of every day, just that grind, just kind of wears on you, in the brain.
Now, I know you've worked a lot with like the sheriff's department, and I believe with SWAT teams and stuff, as well as some of the as an EMT attached to them. Is that correct? Or do I have
Yeah.
that?
So yeah, I mean, no, I mean, as a physician, so, technically I'm a flight medic / flight physician. When I fly with them, I've done stints with the SWAT team as, one of their medics. And like most things, when you're a SWAT medic and you're the doc, they're not letting you anywhere close to, you're not going on an entry team. So I don't even act like I'm one of these, special forces, operators that's, kicking indoors. No, you're in the warm zone, cold zone, just kind of waiting. They're not letting their doc get hurt. So anybody who tells you something like they're in kicking doors, they're full of it. But yeah, and I've done time with the dive team where I was, the dive physician. We go do special missions, out at the river, be there available for, anything that would happen. So I've kind of hit the span of kind of everything in the law enforcement, but most of my work has always been on a helicopter or on a boat. I'm not patrol. I'm not doing domestic violence calls and, going code 3 to anything. So I kind of
you'll still be seeing a lot of traumatic things in that, eh?
Yeah. So on our rescue, we were a medical transport and, a rescue. So we would do, traumas that would happen all over the county. I mean, San Bernardino County is one of the biggest counties in the country. I think it is the biggest in terms of landmass in the country. Our from basically the part of Southern California that hits Arizona, Nevada border. So we would get MVAs, multi-vehicle accidents, traumas, people lost in the mountains, rescues, all kinds of things, and fly them into the trauma center. So I've seen trauma in the emergency department. I've seen it in the field. And it's something I love. I've always loved that EMS world where it's just the field medicine where you can kind of practice without 4 nurses on each side of you and pharmacists bringing you medications and, intubating a patient, waist high level and asking the nurse to raise the bed a little bit to kind of get that perfect, intubation. So, I mean, that becomes, like I said, it's not a physical thing. It's more physical when you're doing it on the side of a 45-degree cliff on a hook, with a helicopter dangling, and you gotta, grab a guy that may or may not be injured, but you're not coming off that hook because you're going to fall to your own death.
How do you feel you've processed or worked through, actually first, would you say that the trauma that you've seen and dealt with and worked on, both, emotionally and physically, would you say that it was harder to deal with on the stuff outside of the ER or in the ER?
I think it's more emotionally exhausting in the ER because it's just the day-to-day grind, right? It's just every day you're just going in. It's the same stuff. You're just seeing the same stuff, the same problems that are in any emergency department in this country, not enough staff, not enough nurses, long wait times, sick people who can't come in and get seen. And then you've got the opposite side of the spectrum where you're getting these people that just can't see their primary care doctor. So now you're doing refills for blood pressure medications or, just simple stuff that's just like, this is not what what emergency medicine was supposed to be about. In terms of the field, I still to this day still love the law enforcement side. I mean, that's where the fun is. There's nothing that's ever the same. You never know what kind of call you're going to get. It could be a simple trauma, it could just be a transport. It could be someone having chest pain up in the mountains where they don't have a cath lab and you're just transporting them down. Or it could be a SWAT call out or, anything. So I think that becomes more interesting and it's not monotonous like the emergency department is. So I wouldn't say that I'm probably burnt out on the law enforcement side.
Yeah. So what I'm taking, if I put it in my language, is the law enforcement side actually fills you up and the ER side is draining you. So
yeah, absolutely.
Figure out how to balance those so you keep filled up, but you still are able to do your quote unquote day job, I guess you could call it,
right.
As such. All right. So how do you, and I know you're in that kind of state where you feel like you're kind of burning out on the ER side of stuff. How do you deal with it? Like, how do you work through it? What would you say that your top kind of 3 or 4 things, maybe 3 things that you do daily to make sure that you stay in the game?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I've got 2 young kids now. So, being with them, seeing them always helps. I love the lift. So, after this, hopefully I'm going to try to get a gym workout in before I got to go pick these guys up from school. So that's another thing. I just try to stay healthy, stay fit. The biggest thing for me was just kind of transitioning out of the emergency department. So I was lucky, kind of pre-COVID to get a phone call from a colleague of mine I work with who knew someone in the executive protection industry. And they were looking for a medical director for their private family office for an ultra high net worth client. And so I was able to, get in with them. And I've been doing that for, 3.5 years now. And I've started to transition with my EMS experience from the emergency department per se and the law enforcement per se over into the executive protection side. And so that's also just kind of been helpful. So I've basically been able to bring my hours down in the emergency department to what, I have to do kind of to be a partner at the facility I'm working at, but also now transitioning to, more fun and exciting kind of different aspect of medicine in the field with the executive protection teams.
I love that. I love that. Change your environment and you change your mindset, don't you?
100%. I mean, it's 100%. It makes it going into the emergency department a lot more when you're like, oh, I only have to work 2 days a week, instead of having to work 3-4 days a week. And then I get to do, with my other 5 days, I've got my kids and these teams that I'm working with, or doing this conference or doing this talk, or, it just changes it up. It really does kind of help with that monotony. And I think that's part of the big burnout, is just the monotony of the same thing over and over again. It does. I'm one of these guys that I have to be busy. I have to be active, but my mind has to be active. You can only see so many chest pains in a day or twisted ankles in a day where it's just like, like AI could do this, doesn't have to be a doctor,
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. Now, have you seen, with your years in the ED, have you seen people that actually love the ED and they love like the regularity of the same stuff over and over again? Have you seen any of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's docs who are doing it well into retirement that I work with, and they just kind of love coming in and working. I just see myself as kind of a different breed, where it's like, I just need a little more excitement of the same monotony, or I wouldn't be, working with the sheriff's department and doing things like that, and love going to do, mountain rescues and doing hoists at 8,000, 10,000 feet. Or landing on a freeway somewhere to pick up a trauma patient to bring on to a trauma center. It's just, I like that.
Yeah. So when would you say that you identified that you knew that that's kind of where you needed to start to put a lot more of your emphasis and energy into, and make that kind of your career path?
So early on in the career, I mean, I didn't get into the sheriff air rescue, the law enforcement side, because of burnout. That was more just, that was my interest. And I think it was probably, and like I said, it was a blessing in disguise. It was just dumb luck. A random, buddy, I mean, not a random, but a buddy of mine basically said, "Hey, listen, I know your background." He knew my background. He also was, he's on the medical side, but does some training with LAPD. And he's the one who just had a friend who was looking for a doc, who basically had not just, ER experience, but had some of that law enforcement, medical experience. So, I mean, it was just kind of dumb luck that, I fell into it. And then as I fell into it, and I was like, wow, I didn't even realize this world existed on the executive protection side, that there was these ultra high net worth that had planes, trains, yachts, houses all over the place. And they were traveling with, medics, special forces medics. They had security details, covert details, things like that. And I'm like, this completely whole different world that I just didn't even knew existed. And for me, it was like, so, I mean, I can train these guys to, be able to do field medicine. A lot of it is telemedicine, where, our clients will travel with different special forces, PJ medics. And, they always have a medical person with them when they travel. And it's not even because they're high risk. It's just because they can, they can afford it, and they do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And they want it. So you're doing all the training side with the personal protection guys. How are you preparing, like, your future? You've got your kids, and this is more for like listeners and that, to do stuff, because I know you're doing it pretty well. How are you preparing yourself, like, for the future, so that you don't end up burning out on those high adrenaline, high rush jobs, and even with the protection stuff, so that doesn't become a monotony of training the same thing over and over again to these protection teams?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, in the emergency department, I've got 3 more years. I've been doing it for 20 years. I figure about 3 more years will get me enough time where I can kind of transition into, the EP world full time. And then in terms of the EP world, I mean, it's completely different. Each client is completely different. I just got a call from a guy in Florida who is looking for kind of medical direction for his team, and his client wants a physician on some of their movements when he's moving. And so everything is different. I mean, I could be working in Silicon Valley one week, and I could be working in Florida one week, and we were just in Arizona last week. So it just makes it different. It's all EP work, it's all medical work, but the training's different. The groups are different. The guys that are running the trainings are different. I mean, I've been afforded the ability to work with some guys, work Grammys. We have in Southern California, we're here in Hollywood, work a Grammys party. I'll be working, the Oscars in a couple weeks on the security side. I mean, because I'm law enforcement, I get to do the security side and, oversee some other things. So you can't burn out on that kind of stuff, because I have the ability on that medical side where I'm not just working a security detail where I'm gone for a week or 2 weeks with the client and, barely home. And I've got the ability to kind of pick and choose who I'm working with and when I'm working. or just kind of overseeing, some of the teams and just kind of knowing where they're at and just being available for them. So it's like the perfect fit at this point. It was kind of the right thing at the right time. So
you just answered the next question that I was going to say is, how do you do it? How are you doing it with family? Because, I used to do protection work with, when I was in the police, looking after prime ministers and overseas diplomats when they'd come into the country. And it's long hours. It's a lot of time. It's, time away from family and time away from home.
right.
But you just answered it. You're making it work for you and picking and choosing how you want it to do. Do you plan on keeping that process in place as you kind of transition out of the hospital and ER?
Oh yeah. So I mean, I just started my own group where we provide medical support, and I'm 46 now. So even if I retire at 49, 50, I've still got 15 years, to go. And it's something I could quit tomorrow and I should be fine. Spend more time with my kids and just kind of pick and choose. But I have the ability to kind of pick and choose what I want to do now. I'm not working for a buck. I'm working because it's fun, exciting. It's something to do, and it pays. But I'm not working for that buck. So it's a little different on the medical side because I can kind of pick and choose what I want to do. And a lot of guys in this industry have to just kind of work. They may or may not be happy with whatever team they're with or who they're working for. But they've got to pay those bills, and for me, I'm just kind of afforded that ability to be a little more flexible, where I can be selective on what I want to do.
I love that. I love that. You said around financial stuff, and tell me if you don't want to talk about this side, but I know that it's a big thing with law enforcement. It's a big causer of burnout as well. Everybody gets so tied up with the I've got to make more money. I've got to, so that I have more money, all these different things. Now I know being a doctor, probably on a fairly decent wage. So it makes it a little bit easier than a police officer who's on not such a great wage. But what would be your advice regarding what level of wage you're on to get to a place of financial security where you can make these decisions, where you can go, actually, you know what, screw it, I'm out and I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to pick and choose my hours. And I'm going to, what would be your, not advice as such, because we're not allowed to give financial advice, but what would you say is the things that you've done to help set you up to where you are? Because I know no matter how much you make, if you're making a whole shit ton, a lot of people make a whole shit ton, spend it all, and they're still in the same position as somebody who's making 40K, whether they're making 400K.
Right.
What would you say your biggest tips around that are for somebody that wants to make sure that they're financially set up, they're able to make the choices like you are?
They're stable. Yeah. So I mean, for me, so I came from very little means. So my parents were both immigrants. They came here from another country. I was born here 2 years after they were basically settled here. We never came from money. I mean, my dad had an AA degree, and my mother worked at a bank for 35 years and retired. And one thing I've kind of learned from both of them was just, slow and steady. The one thing that I'll always remember was someone told me, there's a question they ask you: would you rather have $1 million, or would you rather have one penny that doubles for a month? And which one would you have? And when you do the math, most people say, I'd rather have the $1 million, but it kind of tells you that compounding interest, that one penny becomes, I think, 12 million or 20 million. You'd have to do the math, but it just kind of tells you. So ever since I was 18, I, was opening up a Roth IRA, which we have here in the States, and you just put money in and you just leave it. Let it get its 8 to 10%. Every year you kind of waste not putting money into a retirement account or anything. At the end of the year, I mean, that 10,000 you didn't put in 30 years ago could have been, $1 million plus when you go to retire. That's one thing. The other thing was, for me, even when I did emergency medicine residency, it was between Loma Linda and USC, which is another big hospital. Well, USC was, 4-year residency, and Loma Linda was a 3. Loma Linda I was going to do no matter what, because of the collaboration they had with the Sheriff's Department and Air Rescue. And it was in a place in, the Inland Empire here that's more affordable. I was able to buy a house as a first-year resident, making $40,000 a year, had a roommate to help pay the, the mortgage. I mean, I owe that house, I own it now free and clear. It's worth 3 times as much as 20 years ago. And that just that simple, that 4-year residency versus a 3-year, that $40,000, extra year I would have had to have done. The way I look at it is $1 million mistake. I don't think emergency medicine, you need 4 years. I think a lot of it is, free labor. We're going to have another resident just working for 40 grand a year. And it was $1 million mistake because that money was just 1 year less that I could be making real money doing ER and then investing it in things like that. So, I mean, and I've got lucky investing in stocks and real estate. And, I was able to buy some houses in 2008 when the housing crisis hit us here in California and basically all over the country. So yeah, I'm financially secure. So like I said, I get to pick and choose what I want to do now. It's not for the mighty buck. There's jobs I won't take because they're just clients that I just would rather not work with, or they may not see me as other than just kind of like someone who can just handle some of their problems. I want to work on that level with clients that, there's a mutual respect for each other.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And some great, tips from your life and just, saying what you did. And it's so true around them, just making some smarter decisions, make everything down the road different, and just running with the decisions that you do make. Now I know you've been involved in some pretty interesting situations when working with the sheriff's department and law enforcement. You open to talking about any of them?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about them. We'd mentioned it for basically 9.5 years, I didn't really talk about it at all. Yeah. And then, more recently I've connected, we can get into it. So, I was involved with, there was a big ex-LAPD officer who basically was disgruntled, had a manifesto, and in 2013 basically started a little killing spree where he killed some family members of a cop in LAPD, and then killed killed one Riverside officer. And basically it was just a big manhunt in Southern California. And I'm not going to go into all the details because I've done other podcasts, but basically I was involved in that. I was just so happened to be the doc on the rescue ship that day when we were, still kind of looking for him up in the Big Bear Mountains. And there was a shooting. Two of our deputies, a sergeant at the time, a detective at the time, and a deputy at the time were shot. I was able to transport both. Our detective, Jeremiah McKay, lost his life up on the hill, kind of protecting others. And Alex Collins at the time, who'd had a 2-week-old son, basically was shot also. And we were able to transport him to Loma Linda. And yeah, so I was involved in that. And that was always something I never really kind of talked about. And for a few things, one, I didn't know if Alex wanted us to talk about it. I mean, we've been good friends since. We were just in Arizona doing another podcast. And he's open to it. And he's actually, taken that where, he was shot 4 times, jaw, arm, leg, chest. His phone and his vest saved him, basically from taking a heart shot. And yeah, for the longest time, I just didn't talk about it. One, I wouldn't say the suspect's name. 2, I just never wanted to kind of talk about it because, Jeremiah had passed away. But after talking to Alex, and him going every academy class of San Bernardino County and just talking about the will to survive and how he kind of got shot and how he just came back after 7 months and was basically almost full duty. I was like, yeah, it's a remarkable story and it's something we have to tell. And for anything, we tell it just basically, he talks about it, how he basically thought he was going to die. And, he was able to kind of work through it and, with a little lying for me and telling him he was going to be fine and just kind of give him that motivation to hold on and fight. He held on, fought, and 10 years later, he looks good and still working. He's promoted to a sergeant, and we're able to tell that story, and it's pretty good.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And thanks for sharing that. And there's a reason that I wanted you to kind of share that is I wanted to ask you a couple questions on it. One, did you find yourself becoming negative or any kind of burnout symptoms after that incident happened?
I wouldn't say burnout because I continue to still fly and, and have done other traumas, but none of them hit home like that, where it's one of your brothers, law enforcement officer, that gets shot. I think my hesitation to ever kind of talk about it was just because Jeremiah died. And for me to talk about it, it was like almost publicizing something about someone else's death. And I was looking at it the wrong way. Continuous, hero this and hero that. And, you just don't want to, advertise something like that about yourself. Okay, great. I was there, basically did what I do, and that's it. And I don't want to, boast or anything like that. But like I said, Alex has basically told me, no, you got to tell your story, bro.
I love it. I love it. How do you think that actually telling that story helps people to stay enthusiastic about the job, not burn out about the job, and, actually be able to turn up and be the best cops they can be, and, impact the community in the best ways, instead of, spiraling down that negative burned out stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Alex telling his story. Guy gets shot multiple times, has 20, 30 plus surgeries, multiple. I mean, just basically finished jaw surgeries. 6 months ago, it was 10 years still having jaw surgery, and he basically is promoted from a deputy at the time to all the way up to sergeant. He's running a detail where they're doing high risk, search warrants. He still loves his job. He goes in every day, and for him, I mean, most people would have been like, I'm done, medical retire me, I'm done. Just I'll collect my medical retirement and I'll leave. But he's continued on. So, if you can't take from that story, that will, to continue to work and also just kind of be positive about it, then, I mean, what other story can you tell someone to be positive about, their situation?
Yeah, no, definitely. No, man, I absolutely love it. What would your advice be to your top 1 to 2 things would be to medical professionals currently right now, and also maybe even law enforcement, to prevent themselves from burning out and getting resentful of their current career?
Yeah. So, we say it all the time, right? Your parents used to say, do what you love, right? But does doing what you love kind of pay the bills? So look, we all do something because it's a steady paycheck, great. We like it. We love it. Law enforcement, medicine, EMS, there's going to be a burnout, and you just kind of got to do what you love. So, I could continue to do emergency medicine and make lots of money and do it for 30 years and retire and, have a great life, but I'm going to be burned out. I'm not going to be the best physician. So find something in an aspect of your career, if it's law enforcement, if it's medicine, where you can kind of just maybe start something for yourself or do something different. Law enforcement, I mean, there's executive protection work that are dying to have law enforcement become a part of. A lot of guys don't know it, or they just want to, I just want to continue to get my, my pension. I'm 5 years out from my pension, even though they hate kind of going to work. So find something you love. The money will come with it. And then you just seem to be a lot happier. Like I said, I didn't have an aha moment and say, oh, I'm going to start this. It was dumb luck. It just kind of happened to me, and I'm running with it, and I love it. And that's kind of the way it happened. I mean, that would be my advice. Law enforcement, medicine. I mean, there's so many things you can do in medicine with the degree. I mean, you may not be doing emergency medicine, but you may do some of this consulting work or, something that you enjoy doing.
I love that. I remember my wife used to say that when I was burned out in the police and that. And I was like, oh, what else am I going to do? There's nothing else that I can do. That you got to figure out what you love doing. Like, what do you love to do? And I remember she used
Right.
to say that all the time. And I used to sit there and be like, yeah, well, you just were lucky you got into it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and so never really listened to it until I was on my motorcycle trip when I was burned out, and I came back to the US and I rode motorcycle for 2.5 months around the Southwest US. So I went from Redding, California, all the way to Houston and back again, coming through Southern California actually on the way back. And I remember I saw my uncle, who's an actor, who's coming on our motorcycle retreat, should he not be filming. But he, I remember arriving at his house in Texas, and then we went to the bar, and we're sitting at the bar, and I can remember it just like it was yesterday. We're sitting there, we had a Bud Light and a shot of Jack, and we each did the shot of Jack, and he goes, "What? Tell me what's going on." And I told him that. He's like, "Dude, you said the exact same thing you just said." He's like, "Dude, you gotta figure out what you love, and if you don't love it, figure out a way to love it, like the things that you do love about it." It's like, I just got back. He was in game night, and he's like, "I just got back from filming game night in Georgia." He's like, had an absolute blast, like so many laughs with everybody, with all the different actors and actresses that were in it,
Right.
and that. And he's like, and then I got home, and then all of a sudden there was a big fat amount of money in my bank account. And he's like, but I didn't do it for the money. I did it because I was having so much fun. And he's like, yeah, in the
Yeah.
beginning, I was earning nothing. But he's like, now I earn a whole bunch. He's like, do what you love and the money will come. He's like, it might take time, but it will come, especially if you're passionate about it. So I love that you brought that up because it's so true in law enforcement. I believe even in the medical profession that I've talked to different people. Both my parents are chiropractors and that as well. And you lose, a lot of people lose sight of the reasons why they started in the first place, like the things that excited them in the first place. And if you lean into those, like you have, yours was all the law enforcement, the versatility, the change. Cool, lean into that side, and all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, this actually, I'm getting paid to do something that I just love to do. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. If I pulled my colleagues and said, oh, we're going to cut your salary in half, are you guys going to still continue to do it? 3/4 of them would leave.
Yeah,
There's no way there's a select few that would probably do it for free.
yeah,
And I think, your financial background, and if you're already set in life, then yeah, you can continue to do it for
yeah,
free. But like I said, everybody's kind of chasing that dollar. A lot of people deal with a lot of stuff they don't want to deal with, but they do it because the pays well, or it's secure, or, family, or they got to pay for college, or, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think your uncle gave you great advice, and I've gotten that advice, and it's easy to roll your eyes when someone's like, "Well, you got to do something different that you enjoy," and you're like, "Well, are you going to pay the mortgage and the car payment and the kids' school and the taxes and everything that come on?" So I get it. It's hard, but there is. I mean, nobody says quit your job and go start something else, and I still haven't quit my job, but I've toned it down and kind of moving forward with new adventures and enjoying it and loving it.
yeah. And if you have that closed off mind of, oh, there's nothing else, I have to keep doing what I'm doing now, and I'll just hate it for another 5 years, and then it'll be fine. You'll get to that 5 years, and you'll just be hating something different. Just
Right.
it's start looking and start being open to different opportunities, and things will change for you exponentially, as you have seen, as I've seen, as so many people that I know have seen. uh Michael, I know that you do a lot of different stuff. If somebody wants to get in touch with you around the personal protection work, or any wants to kind of find out more about you, how do they go about getting in touch with you? What's the best way for that you'd like people to
Yeah.
get in touch with you?
For me, it's just LinkedIn. If you look for me on LinkedIn, I don't know if you'll link it on your
Yeah,
show
down
notes or
below.
anything. Yeah, just on LinkedIn. So, my name, and then also Raven Medical Support Group, which is, the company I started, that will provide medical direction, oversight, consulting, all that stuff in that EP world.
Cool, perfect, man. I love that. And is there any I guess the last real question I have for you is, what would you say your top tip to self-happiness is?
Ooh, top tip to self-happiness. To be honest with you, I think you just got to be happy with yourself, right? Because nobody can make you happy unless you're happy with yourself, and I've dealt with some people where they're just kind of like, they say, you can't make me happy, and they're just like, well, you're not really happy, inside. So you got to just be happy with yourself, and whatever makes you happy is what makes you happy. So I mean, it's hard to be happy when doing 40, 50 hours a week of a job that you can't stand and you despise. um I think it's just kind of an inner thing. You just, stop chasing the money, go after something you really love, even if it's little increments, and slowly transition into something you love. And, hopefully that brings you that happiness that you're desiring.
I love that. I love that, man. What's the thing that makes you the most happy?
My kids. Yeah. I mean, I had kids late in life. I have a 4.5 and a 5.5 years old, 5.5-year-old. I'm 46. First kid at 40. I, I, I was having fun up until I was 40 years old, and didn't want to settle, didn't want to slow down. And I was just, I was living high speed. And, but yeah, no, now I'm sitting at home today, just drop them off to school, going to pick them up, and I love it. So that's my
Wow,
thing.
that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Anything that you'd like to say to viewers, listeners, or anything, any last kind of words before we wrap up this episode?
No, I mean, I get it. There's burnout. Everybody's got burnout. You probably careers that you would think, oh, that must be the coolest thing. That's awesome. And there's just people who's burnout. Like anything, it's monotony, the same thing over and over again, just gets kind of old. if you want to reach out, talk about this topic, talk about any other topic, just, reach out on LinkedIn. I'm open to talk to anybody. If I'm free, we can chat about anything, burnout or EP or medicine, or people who are young and thinking about going into medicine. I'd be willing to mentor and things like that. So I'm pretty open. If I've got time, I'll spend it with people and try to help out where I can.
No, I love that, man. I love that. Yeah, you were exactly like that when I reached out to you. We hopped on FaceTime and just had a conversation for 20 minutes while you're driving to work. It was great.
Yeah.
So yeah,
if I can find time to do it, I'll do it.
yeah. Yeah. No, I love it, Michael. I love it. Thanks so much for being here. And again, everybody who's listening, it's a little bit different episode today, which was great. It was great to see something a little bit different here, a little bit different, and some great, real, precise tools that Michael told us about today. So make sure that you share this episode with somebody that that maybe is looking at getting into the medical field, or is already, or is law enforcement, or anybody that you think will resonate with this, because that's how we get the message out there. That's how people grow and become the best version of themselves. So this is Fight the Burnout. Make sure you like, subscribe, give us a follow, and we will talk to you soon. All notes and links will be in the show notes down below. And thank you very much. And my motto is train hard, test easy, because we're always going to be tested. It's inevitable. So we may as well train hard for them so that they're nice and easy. Till next time, thank you and stay safe.